So yeah, so it's in its 19th year now. So we've got 18 previous winners, and obviously we're excited to hear from Matt today, who won last year. But we also want to use today to encourage everybody to think about submitting for this year as well. So just a little bit more about the award. It is recognised throughout the industry, particularly in the UK, as a prestigious badge for excellence in qualitative research. And the judging panel every year is made up of industry-wide people from the MRS, from AURA, from SMR, from the APG, and also this year from AMSAR. So and also we have some academics. So it's really taken very seriously. I try to be as neutral as possible and leave it to the judges to judge. But it's important to say that that this year that Matt, by the way, was previously an actor, so we're expecting a great performance from him. But I think the reason he won, according to the judging panel last year, is that it stood out for being very creative, but also fun and engaging in its methodology. And actually, it was based on a very well thought out hypothesis, which is always very important, I believe, in constructing a good research project. But also it was building on a great long-term relationship that Matt and Folk Research had with their clients. So that, you know, it's a great example of how qualitative research and qualitative researchers can really excel in their field. So I would also just like to use the opportunity, not talk too much because obviously this is Matt's thing, but to remind everybody what the judging criteria is. And that's, first of all, that it should illustrate great qualitative thinking, that it should have a significant impact on clients' business, that there should be a great story in there, and also have a touch of genius. This is what the judging panel are all looking for, and that it really demonstrates the very best of qualitative thinking and practice, so that it combines creativity, insight, and business application. And we also allow up to 3 years old for the case study. Would encourage everybody to think about entering this year. And as you hear Matt's story, then you can start thinking, and we're going to talk to Matt after it as well a little bit about what it feels like to be a winner. So I think that's probably, yeah, the closing date for this year is the 6th of September. And you just go to the website and click on awards and you'll find your way to the thing. Here is Matt's entry from last, it's my invisible thing. Matt's entry from last year. And basically there's a form to fill out, and well, bon chance everyone. So before I finish, then let me just say that Matt has been a qualitative researcher since 2003 and was a founder member of the Voodoo team. And he's also the co-pilot of the Magic Bus, the roaming research vehicle that took research out of the facility and into festivals, which is brilliant. I think we all missed Glastonbury this year. He's now, well, he's a co-founder of Folk Research, which was founded in 2018. So Matt, winner of last year's award, thank you very much. Congratulations, and looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Luella. Hello, everyone out there that I can't see, but I'm sure you're a lovely bunch. So yes, I'm Matt Allen, Managing Director of Folk. And this hopefully demonstrates our belief that qual needs to go further, what we call kind of enhanced qual, so sort of going beyond the consumer somewhat in order to deliver effectiveness for clients, but also with a degree of kind of creativity, both in terms of approach, but also in terms of what we end up recommending to clients. And obviously we were delighted to have won the award for 2020. So how did it all begin? Ultimately, we've been working with Lurpak since 2012, helping to deliver what most people, I think, would recognize as very sort of engaging, emotional communication. I mean, most people can think of a great piece of comms from Lurpak. And that sort of coincides with our belief that we passionately believe that good brands deserve good communication, and good communication deserves really good research as well. Their whole kind of core belief is to champion good food. That's their, if you like, their mission, their core positioning, to be the champions of good food, and to sort of deliberately move away from the tropes of classic butter advertising, which has tended to rely very heavily on the kind of rather familiar cows in fields, mountainside scenes, all very kind of lush, but all rather cliched. Their whole approach is to kind of go against that, and it's actually held them in pretty good stead over the years. So they've always been about kind of looking for emotionally resonant stories in their comms to deliver a sense of Lurpak belongs with great food, and to keep telling those stories. But obviously, all good comms after a while gets tired. They need to keep things fresh. And so they came to us in 2018 with a kind of broad mission of how do we keep fresh? How do we keep things on track with our kind of core target audience, who they define as food lovers? How do they kind of convey this continuing sense of great quality, great product values, etc., but in an interesting and exciting way? How do you keep a campaign fresh and relevant? Clearly that comes more difficult as more and more people know and have seen your campaign. Second challenge within that was recognizing the fact that over the years, as consumers, our take on what is good nutritionally and what is good food, sort of broad nutritional understanding, has changed significantly, and that's put external pressures on cooking and the kinds of ingredients that are used in cooking, including a high-fat product like butter. And that had led slowly, albeit, to a bit of a decline in kind of cooking occasions, but specifically cooking occasions with butter. So they came to us with this rather complex challenge. How do we get to understand what's really going on? What are the trends with food lovers at the moment? What are their passions? What are their concerns? What are their broad outlooks? But also to find deep, ongoing, universal insights that could to some extent future-proof their comm strategy. This wasn't a piece of work just to address one campaign. Rather, it was there to provide the foundation for work going ahead for 5 years from the time of commission. So, a pretty daunting task, I guess, from a research perspective as well. And I think, it's worth saying they weren't just after kind of raw insights. They wanted kind of direction on how the brand could position that champions of good food. How could that be brought to life in this new age of kind of nutritional and understanding? And crucially, how do you make it relevant across different, and in some cases very different, markets where what is a highly culturally dependent definition of good food is very, very varied. What's considered good food in Saudi Arabia or the Emirates could be very different to what's considered good food in Greece or in Denmark, but we had to find the kind of universal insights that could help to bring or underpin advertising for a global campaign as well. So yeah, not a brief for the faint-hearted. So we kind of broke it down. It seemed to us this needed kind of 3 tiers of investigation. So first of all, the kind of cultural, what's going on at a kind of broad macro level. What are the influences? What is the kind of context? What are the kind of dominant trends? But also, perhaps more interestingly, with an eye to the future, what are those things that are being picked up on, albeit in very kind of small ways? What are the kind of glimmers? So we needed to get to those sort of deeper cultural truths that perhaps weren't overly obvious, but ultimately are fundamental when it comes to cooking and food and things like that. And we felt that needed a kind of broader cultural, rather than just asking consumers directly, looking beyond. Then, of course, but the behavioral side was fundamental. So what are people up to? What are the practices? What are the kind of influences, etc. And again, within that, what are the emergent trends? What are people actually doing? And then finally, great, as I'm sure you will agree, great advertising, great communication is, we would contend, certainly always underpinned by deep emotional, visceral truths. So what's really going on? What are the deeper motivations and triggers at an individual level, which may have some kind of universal resonance as well. The other thing to say is that as well as sort of the sort of classic debrief, distillation of findings, the client was after a kind of repository of inspiration that both they and the agency, Wyden and Kennedy, could use on an ongoing basis, just to look at the kind of language, the pictures, the imagery, etc., that consumers were using directly, so that they could be sure that they were kind of using the correct language and tapping into the zeitgeist in as sort of relevant and meaningful a way as possible. So with those sort of 3 tiers in mind, we came up with an iterative approach, phased over 6-7 weeks across multiple markets. First of all, a period of cultural scoping, as we called it, so the use of our in-house semiotician to look at the kind of visual codes and language that was being used, particularly looking at key articles and studies that had been done in the markets that we were looking at. I should say that this went ahead in the UK, Denmark, Sweden, Greece, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So quite a diverse range, but we underpinned the whole piece with this cultural scoping exercise to provide a kind of body of work, as well as looking back at material that the client had gathered themselves through other studies as well. We felt very strongly that this needed the professional perspective so that we could deepen our kind of cultural understanding. So that involved expert interviews. That was fairly well-known food journalists and bloggers. There were some academics as well, just to kind of dig deep into the kind of influences, trends, things that they're picking up on that we could then use and play back with, or at least listen out for, in the consumer component of the study. And then we did a couple, or one, but divided up into 2 pieces of autoethnography, which was effectively very immersive glimpse into how people were behaving. We set up a series of rather than community, it was a kind of extended immersion online of exercises, task-based things, as well as sort of video and interaction within the household, tasks around cooking, etc. So we could really get to grips and give the client and the agency, which was a key part of this deep immersion into the lives of these food lover audiences. And then after a period of analysis, looking at this, we then picked some of the more, I guess, engaged consumers to go in and visit. This is obviously pre-COVID, and spend a few hours with them at home, typically around dinner time, to get that kind of personal experience. And a part of that was based around them cooking us a meal, and rather than simply just a way of getting a decent meal for once, which is those of you who are out on the road doing core research will know that's not to be sniffed at. We also just got to that moment of where the magic happens, of where the emotions really come to life. Talking about cooking is really difficult unless you're actually cooking, is something that we found in other work. So to actually get people to cook for us whilst we're interviewing them was rather revelatory, and is something both the clients and the agency really appreciated as well, because you really get to see the kind of language and those kind of little nodes of kind of emotional resonance and interactivity, both with the food, the ingredients, but also with other members of the household. Outputs, well, clearly this is something that had to go beyond a debrief. It was there to sort of inspire creativity. That was one of the kind of objectives for us, one of the challenges for us from the outset. So we had a day-long workshop, very immersive, with client and agency, quite a senior team, just to really embed the learning. That obviously, you know, was centered around presentations, but also sort of bringing to life moments via media, via different quotes, verbatim, little cheat sheets, and some kind of workshop activity as well. There was a food lover film, which was a kind of deeply edited footage of some of the stuff we'd captured during the kind of online ethnography phase of as well as the depths, the cook along depths, so capturing them in the moment, and that's very much lived on. And then of course summary decks, because this was a multi-market study, there was a fair bit of local market nuance as well. And then finally that culminated with a food lover library that is still being used today. So that's an extensive repository of the outputs that consumers have created. Now, as I said at the beginning, this wasn't just one sort of, you know, come up with the one magic bullet answer, insight, whatever, to help inform our next campaign. This was designed to give them a kind of a raft, a repository of inspiration as well as insight. The first and key one that we sort of helped crystallize, and that Wieden Kennedy then went on to use as the underpinning of their first campaign from the back of this, was this insight here, which was recognizing that yes, Lurpak had been champions of good food, but they sort of, in that, they had focused on the how and the what we cook. And actually we saw that the opportunity had existed in shifting that to the kind of why we cook, looking about why, what are the motivations, what's really going on, what are people providing when they cook for their family or loved ones or other members of the household, friends, you know, what's really going on. And there was some fascinating stuff that sort of came out of that. But that led to this idea, it was time to look beyond good food and actually celebrate the cook, to kind of look at the deeper purpose. And a lot of brands are you know, increasingly looking for purpose beyond the purely functional, you know, what is it they provide. And Lurpak and cooking, you know, are a natural kind of partner for this, for the cook, and to be seen to sort of champion and hero those as well, which, as it turns out, and this was just before the pandemic and lockdown hit, but it turned out was very timely, because those themes around those deeper motivations have got the volume has turned up somewhat, as we'll see. But Wieden and Kennedy took that idea of championing the cook, of being the hero, and tapping into their motivations and putting it into this idea, which could be distilled into where there are cooks, there is hope, which is a really simple, but it turns out very potent, resonant, emotionally rich idea. And that has turned into the campaign, where the Where There Are Cooks, There Is Hope campaign, which you may well have seen. But all very much centering on these sort of deeper idea of offering up, you know, what it is we are doing as cooks to provide a sense of hope, of a greater sense of good through the simple act of cooking, and Lurpak can have a role within that. And as Rory Foster, one of the senior planners at Wieden and Kennedy, said, it was, you know, this kind of insight and series of insight, which was kind of instrumental in making a campaign a success, and that depth and variety and clarity helped develop it as well. So it's very much acted as a springboard. Of course, you know, it would be, you know, easy to kind of leave it there. And as you know, I'm sure someone will mention, you know, a key part of the judgment criteria is how effective has it been. You know, you can demonstrate creativity and an interesting, engaging approach, etc. But how effective has it been? Well, you know, there's a lot of evidence and that this has had a pretty fundamental impact. So since the ad went live, it's been their best year. So this is kind of based on UK stuff, but there are similar stats in some of the different markets that they've used it for. So it's been the best year, up, as you see, significantly year on year in terms of volume and sales. Key measures have also gone up. So things like it's you know, you know, this is the brand I buy nowadays, has gone up from 33 to 38. It's my first choice has gone up 5%, overtaking Flora as market leader by a kind of significant amount, and had outperformed the broader butter spread margarine, is what BSM stand for, growth in both savoury cooking and baking. So, you know, all in all, it's been a, you know, hugely positive year. Now I have to, you know, be transparent that some of this data is some of this growth has come from the fact that we've been you know, in pretty unusual times, which has had a major impact on people's approaches to cooking and how they're using ingredients, and certainly a return to simple pleasures of baking, simple ingredients, indulgences like butter. But nevertheless, the fact that this has been benchmarked against, you know, standard, the broader category, and kind of other KPIs, it is up, even in that being taken into consideration. So all in all, you know, it's been hugely successful. We're currently, as we speak, about to embark on another piece of work which is sort of related to this, which is all about sort of defining the sense of purpose. So sort of taking it a little bit further, defining Lurpak's purpose in consumer lives and how cooking fits into that, with a specifically more tying it in with Arla, the parent brand's broader kind of sustainability and CSR remit. But that again has stemmed from a lot of this work as well. I can send links to the ads. Hopefully some of you have seen the Where There Are Cooks campaign. I have tried playing it in the past, and it, thanks to Zoom, is always a bit clunky, so I won't now, but happy to post it in the relevant place if that's helpful. But Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's demonstrated and has been helpful for those of you considering pitching for this year's prize. Something we're very proud of, having won it, but also just the process itself, and the fact that it's given, a very senior and successful brand team like Lurpak a sense of kind of drive, a new direction, a sense of refreshing the brand and what it stands for. Um, and giving this sort of springboard for inspiration for future work. So very welcome to receive any of your questions, thoughts or observations. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Matt. So I think, Luella, you have some questions there, don't you?
Well, there's been one come in. Hopefully there might be a few more. I have a couple.
Okay.
Just to say thank you very much. That was glorious. So Chloe has said, what an inspiring presentation and what a glorious project. Out of interest, does the campaign show up similarly in all those different markets?
It has, and we do have some stat. I mean, they haven't released it in all markets. I think, or they don't. They have, but more recently than this, so we don't have data. But anecdotally, from the client and the agency, it's all looking very, very encouraging in the other markets where they have. So, and it is a good question because one of the challenges was to identify those universal insights to be as relevant in MENA as in Northern Europe, for instance. I know that they've adapted the core idea for use in the likes of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but with the core fundamental idea of where there are cooks, there is hope, and it's gone down very, very well there. There are some executional nuances in terms of how food is handled and things like that, but the fundamental campaign remains the same, and so far everything we're hearing has been hugely encouraging.
I wondered what the main challenges were in there and whether there were any surprises.
Well, I mean, I think the core challenge, which we sort of hopefully we alluded to up front, but it was just the scale of it. How do you find those universal resonances that are cross market, as potentially inspiring, but also that are future proof, that are not just sort of dependent on what's going on at the moment, and kind of short-term trends and things like that. So I think those, and also knowing that we had to be creating material that was going to inspire and be used as a resource for 4 or 5 years by the agency and the brand team. So it was a kind of epic scale, and of course budget helped. It wasn't an insignificant budget, but nor was it exhaustive. We couldn't go out and just do loads of groups and make it an endless where we kind of kept checking in with people. We had to be pretty efficient with our approach, given that we were talking about 6 markets, and you then have to factor in translation and home visits and all this sort of thing. So I think the core challenge was the kind of epic scale and challenges of the objectives.
You've got the questions winging their way in now.
Oh wow, fantastic.
So from Martin Nee, do you think the notion of championing the cooks could have happened without having had participants cook for you as part of your methodology?
Very possibly. I mean, I think it is one of those sort of deceptively simple universal insights. I think there were other things. Obviously, we can't tell you all of the other insight areas that we came with. We identified, I think, 15 in total, of which a number are being used for future development of work. So a bit sensitive about the others that we can share. We obviously can share this one because it's out there in the public domain now. But I think certainly some of those other ones we wouldn't have picked up on, for sure. I think had we not actually been there in the space, talking to people, capturing those moments of magic and interrogating them, sort of going beyond that kind of visceral system one response that you get when you're in the moment of cooking, and kind of laddering them up as to, well, why did you do that, and why do you feel that way, why do you think that's necessary? Those little nuances of behavior, of people looking expectantly as you know, whatever it is they're cooking, like a lasagna is starting to crackle up, that sort of thing is the kind of richness that I would say you can only really get by being there, as close as possible to the cook. And you know, and that was one of the challenges that the agency in fact came to us and said, look, you know, we know cooking is emotional, and you know, arguably goes beyond the emotion into that kind of primal visceral part of us. But when you get people turning up to groups or doing online stuff only, it all seems a bit dry, you know, and it all tends to default to the kind of rational. You know, how do you get to those little moments of magic, or you know, people passionately talking about a certain implement in there that they use, their favorite spoon or whatever in their kitchen, and why? And you know, that was how we helped kind of unlock those sort of more magical moments.
From David Preston, we've got, hi, thanks, Matt, really interesting. Did the project include getting internal stakeholders onside as part of winning the proposal, especially with a quite unusual stroke different methodology mix, or were they up for it from the off?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, sometimes you have to sell a project, and particularly to some clients more than others who are perhaps used to more established, conventional, or more perhaps linear approaches. I think here, you know, as hopefully you'll see in the advertising just alone prior to this campaign, they're a fairly open-minded bunch actually. And even within the broad organization of Arla, they have the Lurpak team have a very, you know, for good reason, a great deal of autonomy. They work with Wyden and Kennedy, who are known to be quite creatively bold. So I think that was certainly helped by an open-minded client. Clearly, we did have to pitch this. We were up against a couple of other very strong agencies, and from what we know, you know, other good pitches as well. But I think there was a sense that they were on board from the start. We weren't met with any kind of resistance, you know, and once we were up and running and they bought into it, it was great. And I think part of that was also part of the selling was saying, look, we can get you involved as well, both through the window via the kind of online, longitudinal kind of online method, but also, you know, cook-alongs in home. We can bring one or two of you into each one across a number of different depths and in different markets. And I think that really helped to sell the approach.
Jill Redfern's got another one, which is really interesting. Thanks for sharing. Can I just ask how you went about capturing the video footage in home so that it didn't get in the way of the observation and discussion, handheld or fixed or on a tripod?
It was very, very casual. It was, in most cases at least, it was just handheld, just small little cameras that look pretty discreet, because, you know, we'd set these, we'd built up a bit of rapport with our respondents already via the online piece. You know, which was fairly interactive. So there was a fair degree of kind of trust and rapport. They'd also done some their own self-shot footage with them and other members of the household, some of which was used in the video as well. So by that stage, they're pretty comfortable. Then you go in with, you know, you're up front, you're saying, look, there's going to be 2 or 3 of us coming in, me and 1 or 2 agency or client members. And in the case of the Middle East, we had simultaneous translation as well. So we had to be very upfront. This is not, if you like, a natural situation. We're not truly being fly on the wall, but, you know, we just played that to our strength and said, great, can we capture some of this as we go? And then, you know, also, you know, can you tell us what you were just saying about this moment or this ingredient or this utility that you've used or the reaction there. Can you say that again? So it was a very direct and upfront way. It didn't seem to inhibit anyone anyway. And I think the other thing is also the people that you pick, you know, to do this, they tend to be the most engaged. The great thing about having done a kind of longitudinal piece beforehand is you see those who are engaged with the process and up for and open for talking to you in this way. That means they're pretty relaxed when you turn up and shoot the odd bit with your camera.
If the brief landed on your desk today, do you think you'd handle it differently at all?
Well, I mean, you know, I think the COVID thing, you know, that would have been the big difference. How would we have gone in home? How would we have found ways to doing that? I think, you know, you know, we'd have had to think a bit harder about that, and that would have been a real pity. But I think no is the short answer. I think you know, in terms of the core approach, you know, it's something that we've been really happy with. And as I say, you know, the ultimate proof is in the pudding. It's worked for them, it's worked for us. We won an award. We're talking to you guys. So no, I think other than the logistical challenges of, you know, how do you deal with it in a kind of socially distanced way.
We've got two more come in, and these will be the last ones unless any more come in the interim.
Yeah.
One is probably more of a statement than a question, which again is from Chloe. She says she loves the use of the word cook because she's always thought of Lurpak as being very foodie, which implies something fancy and aspirational. I'm guessing you recruited an interesting mix of home cooks versus super foodie people.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a really good observation, actually. One of the, and taps into some of the insight areas actually beyond this, but also, yeah, well observed, the cook rather than the chef. I think that is absolutely spot on. What we said, to be a creator of what you consider good food is wildly variant. You know, we went from people who were seriously kind of molecular, you know, wannabe molecular gastronomists, sourdough, you know, people with fridge in Copenhagen, fridge fulls of fermented goodies and all sorts, through to people who, you know, they felt they were fabulous cooks because they could knock up a decent lasagna. What we found is that universal, or those moments, those needs, those emotions, those drivers that really lit people up were universal. That's what we were looking for, actually, were universal, regardless of technique or sort of status. Or, you know, you've got foodies who are very much defining themselves and, you know, insufferably going on about their starters. I held my hand up. I'm one of those. You know, having done sourdough for many years, through to, yes, to say the simplest of mums and dads who were just proud that they got their kids excited about cooking and things like that. So you're absolutely right. And the recruitment was a key part of it, as was then the kind of next sort of stage selection from the ethnography, online ethnography.
Simon's cropping up with two questions. Wait your turn, Simon. Ali Percy says, thanks, Matt. Did the methodologies work equally well in all the different markets? And were there cultural sensitivities that you had to adapt to?
Yeah, they did. They did work. You know, there are always challenges when you're doing, particularly when you're looking to tap into sort of deeper emotional truths. You do have to push people and, you know, laddering and that sort of thing to get beyond the superficial. And you have to be sensitive in the ways you ask questions and the ways you do that. But ultimately, you rely on good partner moderators. And, you know, we've worked with partner agencies for some years. We know the ones that are good in certain situations and share our kind of beliefs in terms of how you get the most out of people, the kind of techniques and stimuli you use to do that. Yeah, you know, the key cultural sensitivities are perhaps the most obvious in the Middle East, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, around just, you know, respecting, you know, cultural norms there, and having female moderators, etc., and you know, chaperones, things like that. And obviously then the layer of having simultaneous translators. But it didn't get, you know, once that rapport had been built, and I think helped by the online ethnography, that had built that rapport, it didn't really inhibit anyone in any way. And I think the other thing, we didn't get into the detail of it, but a big part of our analysis before, so between the field work and our study and the presentation and workshop with the client, was actually having day-long sessions with local teams, moderator teams, to really interrogate, pick through the evidence, pick through the outputs that they generated, and to perhaps challenge them as well, just to make sure that, you know, there weren't, and we do that also at the briefing stage as well, but just to make sure there weren't things that kind of got in the way. But I think, you know, ultimately that's why we kind of went with this approach. We felt that it could work equally well regardless of where we were doing it.
Simon, would you like to close off with your questions?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Such an interesting project, and you're a lucky guy to get
absolutely
to get such a project, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, as qualitative researchers, I think we are kind of privileged to get an insight into other people's lives, and I just wondered, how, at a personal level, how did it feel being in those houses, being cooked for by ordinary people in different cultures? I mean, that's an amazing experience.
It absolutely is. I mean, on a personal level, I am you know, I'm probably squarely in their food lover target audience, and you know, so for me, anything to do with cooking and food and the celebration of it and the celebration of the act of cooking, I think, you just, as you say, absolutely fascinating, and yeah, actually, you know, kind of just deeply insightful, just to see how other fellow food lovers behave, and it's sort of sometimes a bit like a mirror, as to why, you know, it just taps into, yeah, that's why I do that. Of course, it helped, quite revelatory to me, and I know other moderators saying, well, that's actually, I'd not thought about why I spend time on doing this, or talking about this, or have a particular favorite ingredient or recipe, or you know, spatula or mixing bowl. I'd never really thought about it, and it genuinely is one of those pieces that, you know, as you say, that a golden bit of research that genuinely opens up stuff in you as well. And yeah, it just also just gratifying that our respondents went along with it. You know, to have a stranger and you know, 2 or 3 strangers come into your home and to say, right, I'm going to cook something for you, you know, was really quite, yeah, I mean, you know, gently kind of moving in a way on reflection, because it is a very personal thing, and you're going to the heart of their homes, the kitchen.
Absolutely.
So yeah, no, yeah, but you're absolutely right, and I'm glad we've conveyed a sense of a bit of that kind of magic and privilege, I suppose, of being there.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And the other question, I mean, obviously, you were the winner last year of the Excellence Award. Just wondered what it feels like to be a winner of the award, and what you feel the benefits are to encourage people to sign up for this year's, or submit an entry for this year's award.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes, I mean, it has been an honour. I think the first thing I'd say is it's a weird year to win anything when you can't really, or certainly at the time when we were announced, it was all done remotely. I said to you earlier, Simon, it's a bit like, I'm a Liverpool fan, and no booing or hissing. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm a pure Scouser. But Liverpool won the Premier League last, you know, just as lockdown was happening for the first time in 30 years. And it in a very small way, I got to feel what it was like, that you couldn't go out and celebrate, that you couldn't revel in the glory. So it was all done, it all felt a bit surreal. However, it has been really, it's been great, leaving aside the cash prize, which we will put to good use. But I think more what it has done is opened up some doors, frankly. It's other clients that perhaps we've not been in touch with for a while. It gave us an excuse to get back in touch with them. People got back in touch with us. It's allowed us, we've since joined 3, I think now at the latest count, rosters on the roster list, which in a way has helped. I don't know about shortcutting, but it certainly helped to open up doors. Some pretty big clients have said, will you come and speak to us or give us a credit, which normally certainly if you're cold calling, you'd have to bash endlessly on doors. So it has been really helpful. And yeah, I think there is a bit of pride there. It's nice to be recognised by your own and people who work in the industry. I think qualies tend to be a relatively humble bunch, most of the time at least. So it's rare you get a chance to crow about things. But people have asked, so for instance, Aura, the client body, that a great organization to get a chance to talk to, they asked us to do a similar presentation on this to them, and then we've subsequently been nominated as Breakthrough Agency of the Year as a result of that. So yeah, I mean, I have to say, Peter, one of my colleagues, is a big awards man. I was a bit of a agnostic about awards. I thought the work should be good enough, maybe as an actor, because I never won an Oscar. But I think actually having won, I'm so glad we entered, or even just to get recognized, shortlisted. I think it has been both for sort of personal pride reasons, but pragmatic commercial reasons. It's opened up some doors. So definite endorsement, definitely encourage you to do that.
I think that's a really good note to end on. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
This is actually there's going to be another webinar this afternoon. So if you're around and can pop in at 2 o'clock, we have the highly commended entry from last year as well. And I think I better just trail a couple of AQR things. We've got the call for papers actually for AQR and Aura, and the deadline for that is 12th of August. So go and have a look on AQR's website. And we have a 2-day mod skills workshop on the 21st and 22nd of October coming up. Also look on AQR's website, and I'm sure there'll be stuff appearing in between. So keep your eyes open. But in the meantime, thank you one and all for coming and for sharing your time, which has been really, really cool. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you and good luck, everyone.
Cheers.
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 Bye.
Bye.